Actually, I was born in 1931, the year of Manchurian invasion by the Japanese. Well, I have been in a social political movement since 1950, the year of the Korean War. And since then, have been engaged in different kinds of people's movements for social change, for peace, against the war, because one after another war started, and even now we face a major war and the danger of new wars. And so in that course of events, I have been writing about the global situation, political situation, and Japanese states, and problems that the Japanese society and the world faces. Somehow I started to involve myself in movements of some international character, first in the anti-nuclear bomb movement in the 50s, following the Bikini hydrogen bomb explosion that victimized fishing people fishing in the Pacific, including Japanese tuna fishing ship. And then started a very interesting movement, totally grassroots, super partisan movement started. It is called anti-nuclear bomb movement, movement against atomic and hydrogen bombs. After my student days, I got involved in that movement as a secretary in the international section of that movement. The name of the movement is called the organization is called Gensui Kyo, which held a large international conference called World Conference Against A and H Bombs in 1955. I got involved in that movement as a member of the secretariat in 1957 and did international work. And so that is the beginning of my involvement in international work. Although I had previous experience as a youth movement member, but fully I started the international work as part of Gensui Kyo movement. I started to write about the movement in Japanese, of course, and in '59 my first article on the meaning of the opposition to nuclear weaponry. It was the beginning of my writing for the public. It was carried by Shiso Journal by Iwanami Publisher. Then I was working for a news agency called Japan Press Service, which was connected closely with the Xinhua news agency and sending articles to Xinhua. During the 1960 big mobilization against the conclusion of a new security treaty called AMPO Treaty with the US, which was pushed by Kishi Nobusuke, a very notorious sort of corrupt politician who actually managed the economic sort of construction of the puppet Manchukuo government and was imprisoned as Class A prisoner. But he was acquitted the day after Tojo and others were hanged to death and became prime minister again. So it was a very big struggle. But actually, I myself wasn't involved directly in the struggle, although I was participating in demonstrations, but as a person. So that was how I started to write in English, not only for Xinhua, but also for other progressive publications in the world. I joined the Communist Party in 1951 during the Korean War. We are still under occupation, and occupation authorities were very ruthlessly suppressed movements, and students were arrested and put to military trials and so on and so forth. And I joined the Communist Party in 1951, and I continued to be in the party. I skipped all the twists and turns, which are very complicated. But anyway, in 1960, the Japanese party was totally with the Chinese party because the party was critical of the Soviet Union. And there was very, very strong pressure from the party leadership on position of a new program, which provided for two-staged revolution. First stage against American imperialism, and second stage against Japanese monopoly capital. And I was critical of this approach because the two enemies were treated as though they were separate entities. In fact, they are the part and parcel of the post-war Japanese system, state system and economic system, and so it's impossible to go one by one. So I belong to the faction in the party that was against that draft program. In 1961, the party 8th Congress was held, and there the program designed on that basis was carried through. And many people resigned or kicked out and so on. But I stayed on until 1964, when there was a major split of the party on the partial nuclear test ban treaty, which the party opposed, and China opposed, and the Moscow supported, etc. And there was a major split, and I wasn't totally with them, but at that time I was expelled in 1964. So I became an independent political activist. That was when the Vietnam War was already starting in the form of Tonkin Bay incident. And in 1965, the full American invasion started. There are so many people, activists, kicked out of the Communist Party for one reason or another. There's a sort of accumulation of ex-party members who are still active and who are thinking independently. With my friends, and my close friend Yoshikawa Yuichi, who was in the Peace Committee, which is under the Japanese Communist Party influence, I mean command. He was expelled, and so there are so many people who were concerned really with the situation, the war situation. And so we organized ourselves and made the first demonstration against the American invasion of Vietnam. And then the same year, it was in April, I suppose, that we started that. And in June, there was a new initiative coming from sort of liberal intellectuals. Very interesting. I mean, Oda Makoto was a person who was sort of persuaded to start something. And he was a very, very well-known person. He's 1 year younger than I, of the same age, born in 1931 or 32. He went to America and studied there. But rather than studying, he chose to go about it. He was a globe trotter. I don't know how he could sort of finance himself, but he traveled and went into people's ordinary life and wrote a collection of essays. I Will See Everything, it was the title. 何でも見てやろう. Very interesting book. His surprise at looking at new things, going to Harlem in New York. He visited black people's residence. And there he saw that hot water come out of faucet. It was a real surprise to him, because that was a collective apartment, and so hot water is supplied. That's a very poor American black people's living quarters. And that kind of thing was a new experience for Japanese, who are still, many of them are still living in shanks. So such surprises, and so it sold very well. It's a million seller. But we regarded him rather as a nationalist, because he was talking about the Japanese people, no? Japanese life in comparison with the life in other parts of the world. He actually experienced the same school days as myself in Todai, in the University of Tokyo. Yet there's no hint about his being part of the movement in that period. And so we don't know. Tsurumi Shunsuke, he's also a very important person as a thinker, philosopher. Well, I think he's the one who started cultural studies earliest in the world. And 思想の科学, Science of Thought, monthly journal, as well as a sort of a group. It's not academia, it's a sort of a very civil kind of intellectual gathering. And he says that he's himself a pragmatist and not but still he was considered part of the progressive camp in a broader sense. And in the Ampo struggle, that was the 1960s struggle, he was one of those who really fought against the government. And Tsurumi approached Oda and somehow persuaded him to be the figurehead of a movement he wanted to have. And Oda agreed. And so a sort of intellectual move started involving very famous young writers and sort of independent, not seriously political, but more or less left, liberal left kind of intellectuals there. Actually, it is important to note that in the post-war Japanese society, Marxism was the main ideology of intellectuals. It's not just a Communist Party. Communist Party is Communist Party, but Marxism permeated intellectual world of different types, basically two types. Democratic revolution kind of people and other people. Generally, the post-war Japanese, immediate post-war Japanese situation is that left friends, Marxist and liberalist, they were debating, but still are constituting the left wing of the public opinion, based in cities. In the countryside, it's not, the situation is totally different. There, aka is red. That's a sort of a smear word, and so aka should be sort of ousted from the community. Kind of ideology prevailed in the countryside, particularly, but in the cities, in the major cities, are left, and particularly Tokyo, Marxism was prevailing in the academia, especially because the imposition of imperial ideology since before the war by the imperialist government was so strong, and so this totally mythical, impossible kind of view of history was imposed from above. So the historians, left historians, during the war prepared a series of works which came out. So it's basically it was a historical materialism kind of approach, but very minutely worked out series by a bundle of historians. So there's enough reason for the intellectual public to review the past on the basis of Marxist idea of history. Marxist economists were not necessarily anti-establishment. Some of them were recruited by the government and became sort of a designer of post-war Japanese capitalism. Yet they still remained Marxists. In that intellectual situation, the Vietnam War came. The Communist Party, of course, reacted, supporting the Vietnamese struggle. So it's a matter of supporting. New move that was started by Tsurumi-backed Oda initiative was so amorphous. It's not yet a movement at the beginning when they held the first demonstration. So we are wondering whether that can really be a new movement. But those people who started the action in April, I mean immediately after the bombing of North Vietnam started, heard that a new move was started by Oda and Tsurumi and others. So I met with Tsurumi and told him that I congratulated the start of the new movement and offered to join. So we joined. And that was how a movement which soon became a Baharian movement began. There was another trend which was sort of appreciated by Tsurumi very much. That was movement of voiceless people. During the 1960 Ampo struggle, there was big demonstration. Every day there was mobilization of tens of thousands or more, organized mainly by Sohyo and other trade unions and organizations. Kishi was actually cornered and very much sort of felt totally isolated. But he pointed to the stadium, baseball stadium, saying that they are there watching baseball. And I am supported by the voiceless people. So, women painter, an artist, not in Tokyo, near Tokyo, made a flag and came to Tokyo. The flag says group of voiceless people, and people who are not organized, but who are really keenly interested in the action and so on, who are watchers. They followed. And so there was a sort of trend which Tsurumi appreciated very high. So Tsurumi's idea was to revive voiceless people's sort of spontaneous movement. And there's a political scientist, Takabatake, who actually was pressing that line. But he left soon to America and to study. So anyway, that was one trend that joined a new movement. So it's a sort of composite of people of different trends, tendencies, and outlook. But they got together. And Kaiko Ken, who is a very famous young novelist, Oe Kenzaburo, who won Nobel Prize, and Kaiko, those two were the shining stars of the time. And Kaiko joined the movement. And we started a campaign to work on American public, because it's American war. And American policy depends on the American public's inclination. So we started to raise money to put up a full-page advertisement in New York Times. And that had a great repercussion. I wasn't sure whether this can really be a movement or not. But there's an interesting film director, half retired, but very, very ambitious in a way of organizing intellectuals. And he had his private office. And that was the first office where the New York Times campaign was carried out. And Kaiko himself was very serious about it, and he ran about with appeals for money. Wherever there is a meeting, he went, and it was very new thing for a very famous young writer to come in person and with his hat. He circulated the hat, and this kind of thing occurred. And it was a very interesting situation in the first half of the 1965. And money came, it's from anonymous people. At that time, we had still 100 yen banknotes, no? We don't have it. Now we have only coins. But at the time, it was a sort of paper money. And standard was 100 yen in the envelope sent from all over the country. And I felt that this has become a movement. Actually, Secretary General kind of person was Kubo Keinosuke, who was a commercial film producer. Now out of job, but his private office was used for the movement. And I said, with the pile of envelopes in front of me, I said, now this has become a movement. Kubo said, no, Muto, we became major. Major means that the mainstream business. That's I remember it clearly. But Oda really meant it. He was a man of great caliber. And Yoshikawa Yuichi, who was fired by the peace committee, he was a sort of full-time executive, but was expelled. Actually, there's some story about it, and thus the new move called itself Beheren. Originally, it was a coalition of citizens and cultural movement organizations. So it was, the original intention was to get sort of organizational affiliation. But that failed because the Communist Party influenced groups refused to join. So after all, it became not a coalition of groups, but a sort of gathering of individuals. Oda wanted to do something through this movement. He had very extensive personal connections with the intellectuals and left intellectuals in America and other elsewhere, later in Europe. So he proposed to have a teach-in. Teach-in was a sort of fashionable sort of form of movement, meaning that people get together and pass the whole night until the evening sitting and discussing. It started among the American students. He tried to import that idea. We actually had a teaching, overnight teaching in a hall where we invited all the party leaders, beginning with the Liberal Democratic Party, Socialist Party, Communist Party. They came. And it was televised, and it was supposed to be televised throughout and until the morning. We invited the American left, Carl Oglesby, who was a very well-known American young left leader of SDS, Students for Democratic Society. Carl Oglesby stood up and attacked American government, calling Johnson Caligula or something, a very strong accusation. And then Miyazawa Kiichi, who was a minister of the government, well-known economic minister, stood up and he said that this vilification I can't bear, so I leave. So they left. And then the TV broadcast was cut off. So that's how things developed. And so such an event itself created sort of a reaction. This is one of the styles of Oda and Beheren. And so people, left people, genuine left kind of people, were sort of critical. This kind of show wouldn't work. But it worked, and it attracted people, particularly young people. Oda began to write a series of essays. It's semi-theoretical essays in Sekai Journal, putting emphasis on individual. In principle of individuals should be the goal of movement, confronting the logic of the public. The logic of the public means the state. His critique or his anger was at the kind of logic that forces individuals to sacrifice himself, herself, for the public, for the state. And that was the principle that worked during the war. So individuals first. And this was very new. And to the traditional left, not acceptable, because the traditional left has its own public. So you should sacrifice yourself for the cause of the people. So Oda's was not strongly against that, but his was against the state's monopoly of the public, which takes it for granted that individuals should sacrifice themselves for the sake of the public. And that was, I think, a very, how can I say, a new thing. It's new because the individualism was flourishing immediately after the end of the war. Yet what Oda was saying was something different from the individualism promoted by some one major circle of literary critics and novelists, because it's related to action and movement. After the war, in the 40s, two circles were formed, literary, among literary critics and novelists. One modernists, the other Marxists, kind of thing. But that was a sort of very barren kind of discussion to me. But what Oda was saying had nothing to do with that kind of antagonism. And he also had a very critical view of liberal democracy, saying that democracy is a system under which 1% of belligerent mind of individual can be mobilized into 100% belligerent national mobilization. The danger of liberal democracy also he keenly sensed. And also he denounced the notion of sange. Sange is disintegrating as flower, kind of. Sun is it's a Chinese. You understand that? Sun. Ge is flower. What? Like so. Just explode as flower. That is a very glorious and laudable thing. And he denied that very strongly. And counterposed to it, Nanshi. Nan is difficulty. She is death. Death in difficulty. That is dying for no purpose. Dying without any justification. Dead bodies, which are so many. And people also dying stink. That's the basis. Individual so perishable, and individual who had to die without reason. So there are so many people who died. Oda's experience was from the American bombing on Osaka, a day or two before the surrender. I myself experienced that. But there's no way of explaining why they died. They just had to die. So they are equal. Everybody is equal because they may be dying. Nanshi. Actually, I wrote an essay on it. But anyway, so that kind of approach was to deny the glorification of the state and state cause. And that's what was happening in Vietnam and everywhere. There's repression, there's people who are killed for no reasons. And the third element which he contributed to the movement was the mechanism of victimizer becoming victims. The interaction between assailants and the victims. That was very important because the Japanese peace movement after World War II was built on the basis of victim consciousness. We suffered, and so never this suffering again. we are bombed, we are atom bombed, so we need peace. But that happened after Japan killed so many people outside. So the Japanese people became victims because they were assailants. So this mechanism itself should be the target of movement to wipe out, to overcome. He didn't use imperialism as a word. He did use sometimes, but not as a main category. But that is his way of describing imperialism. And so that was how the movement base was renewed. Because his writings had great repercussions. So individualism, Nancy, and assailant, victim, mechanism, these were, how can I say, constituted an idea. So it's so different from voiceless people kind of approach, because those voiceless people form a column when the mainstream mobilized. So organized mainstream couldn't include those people. But in the new Beheren case, it was a sort of creating something from nothing. So Beheren was organized with Yoshikawa as Secretary General, because Yoshikawa was out of job. Actually, I asked him to draw a large Vietnam map for the teaching, and he is very good at drawing. So he came and put it up. So that's how he got in touch with Oda and others. But Oda was very glad to have him as Secretary General. Yoshikawa said that he was expelled from the Communist Party, and so doesn't that career harm your work? Kind of modest question he put, but Oda said, no, it doesn't matter at all. So he became organizer, and he was a professional organizer and is a very dedicated person with great ability of management. We said that Beheren is not an organization, but still Beheren in Tokyo, the starting sort of core of Beheren was were organized into a functional group, thanks to him, because Oda has no such ability. He was globe-trotter, and so he was constantly moving around. So I got involved in that, actually participated in that, and satirically it was called the cabinet. Cabinet. So there are ministers. And Tsurumi Yoshiyuki, who is a nephew of Tsurumi Shunsuke, who was working for the International House, Rockefeller Foundation funded sort of club, international club, which housed various academic visitors and politicians. And he was actually working for it. He came from sort of ruling families, and Tsurumi family came from Goto Shinpei. Goto Shinpei was the first governor of Taiwan, and so on. And so they came from, how can I say, a sort of post-Meiji ruling cliques. But Tsurumi Yoshiyuki also joined, and he became critical of America and later of the state itself, and so he developed his own Asia studies and wrote many books. And he got involved in the founding of PAC also. He was one of the 4 persons to start PAC, and also involved in AMPO journal. So such a sort of combination of intellectuals and activists of very diverse tendencies got together to form the so-called cabinet. That's a sort of joke. And the motto was, if you are against the war, then take action, and then you are Beheran. There's no rule of affiliation or anything, no approval from the top. There's no top. Each group has its own, how can I say, action plan, but don't stay just talking about the war. Do something. For Beheran to spread, 2 major things were required. One was the October 8th sort of collision, sort of crash in the street between student movement and the police, in order to prevent Prime Minister Sato's visit to Vietnam. And one Kyoto University student was killed in that crash. And that gave a great shock to the movement, I mean, to society. And of course, the mainstream media attacked the students for violence and so on. It was actually a violent struggle, violent crash. But Tsurumi, Shunsuke, and others who were more or less with Beheran didn't denounce violence of that kind. And young people were particularly shocked by the death of this student. And the second thing is Beheran's own action. We, from the beginning, started to work on the American soldiers, because soldiers are individuals. So they have their family, they have their own personal ideas and so on. So why do you allow yourself to be part of this invading violent forces? So we made the leaflet and the handbills we gave to American sailors mainly, because American aircraft carriers come to Yokosuka regularly for rest and recreation, rest and recuperation, they say. Then real American sailors, 4 of them, from the aircraft carrier Intrepid, appeared. We are appealing for deserting, but actually didn't really expect deserters to appear, but they came. And we got together and had discussion and so on. We decided to help them and help them, harbor them, but what to do? We can't harbor them forever. So get them to go to a neutral country, Sweden. So somehow we succeeded in smuggling them out. And we had a press conference about the American deserters who we are helping. We did the press conference when they were still on the sea, before they arrived at the Soviet Union. Because if they arrive in the Soviet Union and were arrested or killed, there would be no evidence. So before they arrive at the Soviet Union, we told the world that we are sending them out to a safe place. So they are protected in Moscow, and they had a press conference there and arrived at Sweden. It was a Swedish peace committee that helped. So that was a shock, a real shock, because such a thing no one expected from Bahrain. Bahrain is sort of, compared with the political sects, Bahrain is such a sort of fluffy kind of thing. And so the disaster activity lasted for long, although the getting them out business had great difficulty. So we, at a certain point, we switched to working on the American soldiers to fight within the camps. But anyway, very interesting network. We still don't know how many people actually were involved, because it's a sort of organic system, and there's no central leadership. We helped people to stay with private family. That's a very diverse forms of harboring them. And then, of course, there are many troubles, because they are young men. So, but it was a new experience anyway. And very famous writers and intellectuals offered help. And in some media station, I mean, it's a network of people inside the company to help deserters and so on. It's not exactly illegal, because we are protected by the security treaty. American soldiers can freely pass the borders without any Japanese government approval. So wherever they go, if they go from Japan to America, I mean to Sweden, the Japanese government didn't care. So yet the police was very, how can I say, they were sort of alerted, and so various ways, like some young people having pistol, or in that case it was a fake pistol. But anyway, this kind of repression was there, and so we had to hide the whole operation from the police. So with those two sort of shocks, which were quite confrontational with the government, with the state power in America, a sort of radical trend appeared in the Japanese society, because the point is that Bahrain was critical of the Japanese state as it was, state and society, because without expressing any attitude toward the war, the society itself, its industries, its business, were already part of the American war. So this state should be changed. That was the position that was shared by Bahrain and all other left circles which were outside of the mainstream. The major force in the mainstream was the trade union Sohyo and the Socialist Party, which was better, I mean, which actually opposed the Vietnam War and tried to do something in terms of preventing the participation in the war efforts. The Communist Party was helping the Vietnamese. We helped the Vietnamese, and so they raised money. And compared with them, it's a new force. It's not exactly coalition, but the trend among the people to defy the status quo, as compared with the traditional Japanese post-war peace movement, that was to protect the status quo from being dragged into the war again. So protect what you have. But the new trend we had in the second half of the 60s was to question the status quo itself and to change it. So in the broader sense, that was the new left. But it's a little bit misleading because new left is understood as left political sects with militant, combatant troops. But what I was saying is in the book is to show that there's a sort of a zone, movement zone, which was created in which people differently confronted what was being imposed or what was assumed, with or without a sense of solidarity amongst them, yet sharing something and feeling that they share something. And so it's a cacophonous symphony. Symphony shouldn't be cacophonous, but a very interesting sort of formation of a zone in which people positioned in different positions, places, feel some sympathy with the action by others. And if one group fails, then they feel pains. So I call it the period of new left.